Hello, the dramatic and tragic end to chapter 7, and now to chapter 8. Lucky dreamed of the stars again that night. He dreamed they were calling to him once more, making that small, soft, silvery sound, like the chime of a faraway bell, trying to tell him something so important it would change everything, if he could only understand it. And in his dream, Lucky rose up and soared through space into the swirling stars and constellations. He rose higher and higher, until the sound wasn't distant anymore. It was all around him now, surrounding him with waves of overwhelming power, closer and clearer than ever before. It was as near as his own thoughts, like hearing voices in his head. Many voices in unison, the harmonies ringing out as the sound grew richer, deeper, stronger. And then he knew the sound was a song. The stars were singing. The illustrations are great in this book. The meaning of the song lay in its words. If only he could grasp them, but they were so elusive. Already the song was slipping away from him. He reached out his hands to touch it and woke with a violent start. He was in the alien ship. He was alone, flat on his back by the airlock. The floor around him was scorched black. The metal had been badly burned. It had twisted out of shape, bubbled and bent back on itself. It was barely recognizable as metal anymore. It looked like a lunar landscape. He himself was unharmed, though his knees hurt, his hands felt raw, and a headache blazed behind his eyes. He was soaked in sweat, exhausted, and totally naked. Lucky hugged himself, but couldn't stop shaking. Where are my clothes? What's going on? The memory of a dream flickered at the edge of his mind and slipped away. He clambered to his feet. A cloud of smoke and ashes rose around him. He brushed the ashes off his skin and realized with a sickening jolt that they were just the remnants of his clothes. It had happened again, just like the burned bedsheet at home. This thing that scared his mother so much she'd made them leave home. It had happened again. Why does this keep happening? What's wrong with me? Lucky had no answers, only pain, like a great burning hole in his heart where his mother used to be. He felt so lost without her. How could he survive alone? At that moment he would have given anything to have her back, looking after him, taking charge, making plans. Whatever the truth of this terrifying mystery, she would have found a way to make it all better again. And now she was gone, and there was nothing left, not even a crumb of those chocolate brownies he pushed away. He felt such a wave of homesickness, he almost gave up right there. Lucky, my love, you keep yourself safe, okay? He forced himself to focus. Survival, his survival. That was what she gave her life for, and that was what mattered now. He had to find his own way in the galaxy. He pushed everything else out of his mind, because if he let himself think about what had just happened, he knew he would break into 1,000 tiny pieces, and would never put himself together again. First things first, he was still naked, but the bag she packed for him was undamaged on the other side of the cabin. He opened it and quickly dressed himself in new clothes, making a bandage for his knees by ripping a shirt into strips. Okay, so what now? Lucky looked around the cabin of the alien ship. It was nothing like his fantasies of glamorous starships. Even where it wasn't burned, every surface looked dusty and dilapidated. The floor was rusty metal held together by loose rivets. He couldn't even see the ceiling because it was so covered in cobwebs. The broken vid screens on the walls crackled and buzzed with static. He hoped to see the stars from a starship, but these screens were so old and damaged he could barely see the view outside at all. He couldn't have felt more isolated. The only people he could talk to now were a crew of aliens capable of ripping his head off. He forced himself to remember that this was his mother's plan. He was only here because she trusted them, somehow. But I can't, he thought. Can I? No way, and I can't trust the government, not after what the Shadow Guards did. So who can I trust? Who's going to look after me now? He remembered the vidpic on his bedroom wall, a handsome man with a moustache in a Starship Commander's uniform. He'd been watching over Lucky protectively, smiling down at him beneath the blazing stars of a spiral nebula. My father. He's still up there somewhere, and he knows what's happened to me. He warned her it was going to happen, so he must know. His fingers dug into his palms, gripping into this idea because it was all there was. Find my father, that's what I've got to do. A sharp voice broke into his thoughts. So, Groundling, what do you think of our ship? He jumped back, startled. Bixer Quicksilver was standing behind him. He hadn't heard her enter the cabin, but there she was, the needles in her hair glinting electric neon colours. She wasn't wearing her mirror shades, and without them Lucky was dazzled by the silver fire that burned in her eyes. He looked down at her huge black cloven hooves, then up the needles again. He couldn't speak. The whole inside him burned. His mother knew how to talk to these aliens. She knew what to say and do. He didn't. But he needed the aliens' help if he was ever going to find his father. "I need to see the captain," he made himself say. "Can you take me to him?" "Making demands already?" She crossed her arms like a solid wall in front of her. "Let's get something straight right now. You try anything, groundling, and you'll regret it. You do just one thing that damages the ship or brings us into any more danger." She left the threat hanging there in midair. "Okay," gulped Lucky. Bixer looked down and inspected the scorched blackened ground around the airlock. How did this get so burned?" she asked. His heart quivered. If she knew it had happened around him while he was asleep. "Promise me you will never ever tell anyone what happened here." But she didn't seem to know. "Those shadow ships must be ever more powerful than I thought," she said. "Well, I guess it's time we redecorated in here." She tapped the ground with her long, slim fingers. There was a rippling sound and everything started to change. There was the walls, the ceiling, the floor, every surface was suddenly unstable. Lucky felt dizzy. He couldn't even trust his own eyes anymore, but he soon realized what was happening. The ship was cleaning itself, using some kind of alien technology. As he watched, cobwebs fell away, dust disappeared, rust deoxidized and became solid metal. The cabin still looked old, but as it renewed itself, signs began to appear that it must once have been something very grand. It was like a cathedral in space. The ceiling vaulted high above his head in silver arches, which flowed down into the floor through graceful columns, every line curving and connecting organically. And as Bixer tapped the vid screens on the walls, they stopped crackling with static. Instead of showing the view outside, they started to glow from within, filling with vivid colours and light like stained glass. Vidpics now began to appear on the screens. They were images of people, but the most amazing people Lucky had ever seen. They were vast and powerful, more like gods than ordinary people. Some of them had wings and halos, others wielded tridents, scythes, flaming swords, bolts of thunder and lightning. A few held entire worlds in their hands. "Who are these people?" he asked, scalp prickling with the strangeness of it. "The 12 Astræus, of course." "12 who?" Bixer didn't reply. She tapped the ground and a substantial stove appeared. Beside it rose a table and some spherical silver chairs, while swathes of fabric dropped down from the ceiling like hammocks. It was as if a kitchen, a dining room and a bedroom were being jammed into a cathedral, with no boundaries between them at all. But Lucky hardly noticed. He couldn't look away from the glowing figures on the vid screens. "Are they characters from your myths and legends?" he guessed. "Go ahead and laugh, if you think it's so funny," Bixer growled. Her needles flashed danger signal red. "Why would I laugh?" "Because you're just like every other groundling I ever met," she said, stamping a hoof on the floor, her fingers curled into fists of rage. He looked away. He backed away, heart thumping in his throat, hands up, helpless. "Look, if you're really going to hurt me," he managed to say, "get it over and done with." She blinked. A strange expression came into her silver eyes, but whatever it wasn't anger. Slowly her needles cooled, her fists uncurled. She tapped the walls and the lights came down in the cabin. "Well, we're all done in here," she said quietly. "You wanted to see the captain, right?" Yes," he said, surprised. "Then come with me, because he wants to see you." Roman 10. The wolf grows more powerful. The Astræus of fire cannot destroy it, for it extinguishes all things. End of that chapter. Perhaps you could draw the room before and after. Perhaps you could design yourself a self-cleaning room. I'm sure there are some people around who would quite like that. Bye for now.